Hey everybody, we're here with Mike Stevens. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Mitch?
I'm well, thanks. Mike is pretty well known on the stringing forums and whatnot, stringing groups online for being a really helpful guy and really experienced guy. So happy to have you here today.
I'm happy to be with you.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I was in the Navy for 22 years. Did that right out of high school. Got out of the Navy, went into I was nuclear power in the Navy, nuclear industry in the commercial world. And one day I said, you know what? Let's jump out of this and let's jump in the tennis industry. So for the last couple of years, I've been enjoying stringing. But, I've got a chance to do a lot in the tennis world, but I'm most happy with being a good husband and a great dad to three awesome daughters. And that's a lot of people, a lot of people don't know who we are. But that's really who I am. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, and I'm a stringer. I reside in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but I feel like I'm all over the place. I grew up in a little city called Lenoir City, Tennessee, right outside Knoxville. Traveled all over with the Navy, and now we finished up in Chattanooga. So that's where my home is based out of, and String Sensation is the company I started, and that's where we reside.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you touched on a lot there. In terms of your career path, you talked a little bit about the Navy. So
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more in detail about what you were doing?
Yeah. My dad's a college professor. My brother's got more degrees than a thermometer, my older brother, and I didn't want to go to college out of high school. So I did what my parents didn't want me to do. I joined the military, and which is funny. I actually did join on their anniversary. It was their wedding anniversary. So my mom said not the greatest gift, but it's good for me. I was 18, I was young, I was immature, and I wasn't ready for college. If I'd have gone to college at 18, Mitch, I'd have failed out. I know that. So I jumped into the Navy submarine force. I loved it. And wow, it was just good for me. I grew up. Of course, I found my wife. We got married while I was on submarines. Did 22 years in the submarine force. Spent a lot of time underwater. And wow, best 22 years, seriously, of my life. My kids have moved all over. I just can't tell you how much the Navy did for me. So that's my 22 years in a nutshell. Several submarines, nuclear powered, living underwater for 3 months at a time. A lot of people are like, what's that life? I'm like, it's pretty good. Food's pretty good.
I was going to say, we've talked before about that. And I think what surprised me the most is how long you were underwater for at any given time, and crazy.
So COVID-19, we all know what's going on there, and we're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to stay at home for a couple of weeks? I'm like, submariners, we've been doing that for years. Like, we live underwater for 3 months. There is no going out. There is no seeing movies. You're just with your family of guys.
Yeah, that's incredible. Incredible.
It's a unique life.
Yeah. So, going from the Navy, how did you get into tennis?
Yeah. So when I actually left the Navy, I went into the commercial nuclear industry. So I was working at a commercial nuclear power plant, and while I was there, had a couple of shoulder surgeries. So I was into baseball. Growing up, and I played it as an adult. Some shoulder surgeries, and I couldn't play like I wanted to. So one day, my local tennis club offered a little social event where you just come in and kind of play some tennis. And I had never played tennis in my life. I had never played tennis, even though my parents gave me this Bancroft Bjorn Borg wooden racket, like in 1976. But I never really played. Like, I think my brother and I hit it in the yard, but never played tennis. And through this experience at the club, I got paired with this really older lady, double knee surgery. She could barely walk down the stairs. We had to play mixed doubles against another local club group. And I remember looking at her, and she was overweight, knee surgery. I was a really good athlete. And I was like, oh, great. They paired me with this old lady who can't even walk. And it didn't take me about 5 minutes for me to figure out these three players were amazing, and I was terrible. I was like, but this is fun. So I took my first lesson after that. That was 2011, and it just got into my blood. I started loving tennis in 2011, and my daughter was playing tennis, but she was a string breaker, and I got tired of paying somebody to. I mean, when I say string breaker, not because she was so good, you know. Coco Gauff is a string breaker, but she's good. My daughter was a string breaker because she shanked the ball, you know, and I got tired of paying for somebody. So in July of 2013, I bought my first stringing machine. And yeah. So yeah, do the math on that one.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, that's hard. That's hard math for me, man. I've been out of college for a long time.
So I'm fortunate to string some big events, and I've not even been stringing for 7 years yet.
Yeah, that's incredible to me. Incredible.
So, but my first racket though, I was like, wow, I really like this. But that's kind of how I got into the tennis world.
Do you think your background and your history in the military kind of set you up for kind of the discipline that it takes to be really consistent and the procedures that you got to follow to be a good stringer?
I think there's several things. I think that's part of it. In fact, I was talking with, when the guys invited me on the Wilson stringing team, at first they're like, you don't have enough experience. We don't think you're ever going to make this team. And I kind of agreed with them. Turned out, though, what was an advantage to me was, one, I did have a lot of, discipline in my life. But two, I didn't have a year. I didn't have a lifetime worth of bad habits.
Yeah.
I know a lot of guys who are trying to break in a tournament stringing. They've been stringing since, like they're 40 years old, 50 years old. They've been stringing since they're 13, but they were stringing incorrectly for so many years. And it's so hard to break those bad habits. My very first stringing lesson was from Richard Parnell.
Yeah, that's a pretty incredible first lesson.
If you're going to learn from somebody, he's one of the greats to learn from. So I was fortunate to not know how to string, and then I was trained by the best stringers in the world. Grant Morgan was one of the first guys that I came in contact with after Richard Parnell. So I was like, I'm learning from some of the great stringers here. And it transitioned into, okay, Wilson has a way they like us to string. And I think with my discipline and a little bit older, I think it all kind of led into to make a good stringer. I've always said I'm the poster child, if you will, for a symposium, a stringing symposium. Stringing symposiums are there to take the novice stringer and teach them, and maybe one day to be a tournament stringer. Well, that's my life right there.
Right.
I remember when I first met you, that was September of 2014.
Yeah.
I didn't have any rackets under my belt when I first met you.
And it's very funny because we've talked about this before. You were asking a lot of questions, and I was showing you a couple things, and then later on in our careers, you're showing me most of this stuff. So the student has become the teacher, quite literally.
I remember that well. Like you knew, I remember looking up to you so much, and I still do. But I was like, man, this guy knows so much. But you know what? When you don't know anything like I did, like I didn't know anything, you were like, oh, but I'm thankful for those times, I didn't know anything that first symposium. That's why I went.
Well, I think that was what was incredible about that stuff, because obviously I went to my very first symposium, which I think was the year before. It was just because same thing. I was a novice stringer and I wanted to get better. And the second one, I had one under my belt. So it was like, I can maybe help people who have a little bit less experience. And you're a pretty outgoing guy, and you weren't afraid to ask questions. So,
right.
And there it is. And a lot of fun, and really miss that whole crowd of people.
I do too, Mitch.
Yeah.
A lot. I just, I got everything I wanted out of that, those symposiums. And I just wish we had some more, because it's a great gathering of great friends.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of good minds in that too. You know, a lot of good conversation and drink.
The best, you know, and we got a chance to hear from so many brands,
Right.
which was so awesome.
So
I mean, and you know, I was thinking back, all the people I've met in just a few short years, and I was like, wow, it's all it does all go back to the 2014 symposium.
yeah.
It all goes back to that.
Yep. Good times. Good
Great times.
times for sure.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, and again, it's great. I didn't even realize that that's really when you started, was that recently. You know, I kind of assumed it was a couple years before even that. But
Right.
now you've got your own business, String Sensation.
Right.
So tell us what you're doing now.
Yeah. So, you know, and someone said that they're like, you know, you don't do anything halfway. And no, when I do something, I jump in. And so I decided to leave the nuclear industry and pursue this full time. So in fact, it was at the end of the first symposium. I just gone my first symposium. I'd been working on my testing. So at the end of that, we're driving back, and Ron Rocky gave one of the classes about you know, what you can do with a small business, and from that drive back from Tampa that year, I came up with String Sensation. It's like, you know, I can do this. So I formed the company in October of 2014. 2018, I left the nuclear industry. So for the last 2 years, I've been on my own trying to make it work. So what I do is it's real simple. I string tournaments, and I string local events, and I string for local clients. I don't have an online store. So all my income is based on stringing and customizing. You know, I'm not doing a YouTube channel. There's a lot, and I've thought about a lot of that with COVID-19. Is like, how can I reach out and make more? But you know, it really comes down to what I love, and what I really love is stringing and customizing. I've thought about opening a shop, but right now is not the time for me to do that, because that's not really what I love. What I love is working with the player one-on-one, customizing their frames and getting their rackets tuned in just the way they want it. That's what I love doing. And that's what String Sensation does. You know, there's, like I said, no online retail sales for me. That's just not what I'm doing. I may pursue something like that in the future, but right now String Sensation is just trying to be the best stringer. I think I am the best stringer in the city of Chattanooga, but I don't have a lot of competition here.
I don't doubt it, man.
So what I'm trying to do, though, is just, every tournament I go to, I've always said my goal is to learn something new. And everywhere I go, I learn something. And so I'm just trying to get better and better and better every single tournament. I've come a long way, and I've got a long way to go.
Well, and I found in kind of talking to a lot of people in the industry, especially the ones that, at least, you know, number one, that I know, and number two, that I've got a lot of respect for, it seems to be that's the attitude that keeps them motivated, right? It's that desire to constantly be better. Is that what keeps you motivated?
Absolutely. I'm a driven individual for self-improvement. It's probably why I always love golf, because that's a hard sport to conquer. If I can conquer something quickly, I'm probably not interested in it. So I do love the challenge of being a great stringer, because there's always something to work on. When you stop learning, it's time to move on. I'm not going to stop learning for a long time, because I have a lot to learn. But really what keeps me going is truly the personal interaction I have with a player. And it really doesn't matter what level of player it is. I have great satisfaction for stringing for a 10U player, especially those little ones who are so into it, and, you know, they want their racket just like Rafa or just like Roger. But in a weird way, I love it, because that's what they're into. And then you get to that next level player, and they have different goals. And, you know, as you work your way all the way up to the ATP, the WTA, there's this personal interaction that we have that I really highly desire. That's truly what keeps me coming back. I was doing an interview for somebody, and they're like, "What is it that you love about stringing? It seems so monotonous." And it's true. When a frame is on the stand, I actually kind of picture the player and not the frame. It's just like this little interaction that I have, this little connection with that player. And whether it's stringing for my daughter, who was a great D3 college tennis player down in Montgomery, Alabama, or some of the greats, or it's a 10U, I see that player in the frame. So it's not just string for me. It's a player interaction. If there was no player interaction, I don't know if I would enjoy it as much, just to be honest.
It's funny that you say that. As a coach, I feel in a very similar way to that. Tyler from Prince kind of nailed the phrase, and Tim and I were talking about this the other day too, but he said he really enjoys the idea that he's participating in someone else's happiness. And I was like, that's such an amazing way to say that.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing is us equipment guys, we get to participate in someone else's happiness or someone else's success.
Yeah.
What's striking to me is you spent a little more time talking about that 10U player right now. Can you just tell us some of the champions that you've strung for? Because I know that there's a couple big time champions, maybe from a certain Grand Slam tournament that you've strung for in the final.
Yeah. So I always hate to, I try not to do this every time, but yeah. I've been blessed so Elise Mertens, the first time I met Elise Mertens, it was actually Robbie. I met Robbie first, her coach and boyfriend, and it was at the Mubadala Classic in San Jose, and it was early, and we were working together, and he was wanting to change her tension, so I just took some time and went out to the court. And Robbie and I were watching her hit, and he's like, what about this? What about this? And they really asked me a lot of questions. So I kind of got involved with Robbie and Elise Mertens. So I've kind of been a fan of hers for a while. And so when she got a chance to win doubles this year at the U.S. Open with Sabalenka, I was pretty happy, because I strung for a U.S. Open champion, if you will, There's been a couple others, I'm a Coco fan, she's won doubles, So what I've never done though, is I've never got a chance to string for a Rafa Nadal. And then, of course I've never strung for Fed. So there's some big guys on the ATP that I've not got a chance to string for and Grand Slam champions, but I kind of feel blessed to kind of take some of the others and see them win. Naomi Osaka a few years. That was kind of cool.
Your strings are part of history, man.
Yeah. It was kind of cool. Actually there was 2 years in a row, a WTA champion, I got to string for them. But I'm hoping one day I get a chance to string for Rafa. Roger, of course, if I could ever do the Laver Cup, that would be great. I'm never going to string for Roger at a real event because, right. He's got a really good stringer in a little company called P1.
And that's what blows me away. It's like you started stringing so late in the game, compared to I think most kind of career stringers, and I mean your improvement was like exponential. You're like a freaking rocket ship. Yeah, and I could see the improvement so quickly, but it goes back to that symposium where I met, some of the best stringers in the world. And so I was exposed to it so early. I was just an ugly lump of clay. And really, I spent a lot of time with Grant, a lot of time with Richard, and they helped me. And then I just said, you know what, let's go for this thing. So I flew to Spain, spent a week in Spain. Yes, it was with Ursa. Sorry. But, Richard is such a good friend of mine. My daughter and I decided to take a trip together. She had just graduated college, and so it was like a daddy-daughter date to Spain. And I immersed myself in stringing. And that's really the first week of where I could see major improvement in my stringing game, if you will, because that's when I started actually putting it all together.
was like, oh, that's what that means. And that's how you can get better. And I know we'll probably talk about it a little bit, but that's where I started learning that the value of consistency
Mm-hmm.
in stringing.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I've been like, when I tried out for the U.S. Open team, there was 3 of us that tried out that year, and we all met before the 3-day training started, which is a rough test. But we all met, and one guy's much younger than me, much younger. And so, like, how long have you been stringing? And he said 16 years. And I'm twice his age. And another guy's like, yeah, I've been stringing for 30 years. I'm like, at this time, I was like, I've been stringing for 4 years, They're like, no, how long have you been stringing? I was like, 4 years.
How long have you been retired? Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I still pinch myself and go, how did this is what I always dreamed of.
Yeah.
I mean, not always, but, since I started going to symposiums, like, this is what I want to do.
I think getting to, being a friend of yours and getting to see you succeed in your dreams has been really kind of amazing. And I think most of us that know you are incredibly proud of what you've done in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. It's been a blast.
So, again, it's been a small amount of time, but and you've kind of touched on some things, but what are your favorite things about working in the tennis industry?
Yeah. And so, I do enjoy the travel. We get to travel around. When I say travel, I haven't been around the world, but I like going from tournament to tournament. I'm heavily involved in the SEC championship world. So to get a chance to travel around to these colleges, spend a week on these different campuses, that's been very enjoyable. Meeting these college coaches and these college players, that's enjoyable. We kind of laughed a little bit before we started, but, getting together a bunch of stringers is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Some crazy times. And, I think about, there was this crazy Thanksgiving. I spent doing this crazy little international junior tournament in Bradenton, Florida. And I had Thanksgiving dinner with this guy named Mitch Case and Dennis Fabian. And it was a wonderful Thanksgiving dinner. We went to Boston Market and picked up some turkey and took it back to this little place called the Prince Shop. And we all enjoyed a family Thanksgiving dinner. It's stuff like that really I enjoy. I do. It's just like, who would ever think to have a Thanksgiving dinner from Boston Market with a couple of guys that you hardly know? We'd known each other for only 2 or 3 years. But those are bonding moments that I'll never forget. So it's the travel and it's the interactions with people that I get that really makes it fun for me. It's not for the money, Mitch. There ain't nobody stringing for money. Like that's not why you do it. But it's truly, I kind of go back to it. If it wasn't for personal interaction, I probably wouldn't be doing this. It's truly, and that's personal interaction between me, the player, the coaches, and the stringers. As well as I've enjoyed the last couple of years, Wilson started this thing where the public could actually watch us string. And I enjoy that so much. They have so many questions that they never even knew what was going on. So that's valuable and that's enjoyable for me.
Yeah, well, you're a tremendous ambassador as far as I'm concerned. So you're the perfect person to be talking to the public about how some of this stuff is.
Yeah, well, I was just that guy 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. So, is there anything about the industry that you would change?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to that piece, and I think our industry is going to change. I think COVID-19 is forcing us to change. I know in my own shop, I've changed the way I do things. I had never washed down rackets with Lysol before and kept hand sanitizer as much as I do now. And so now it's a very big concern. I have to protect all my players and I have to protect myself. And so it definitely takes me longer to get the racket than before because I spend several minutes on each frame, making sure that if there is something in a germ that that it doesn't go anywhere else. So that's changed. But what I really think I would love to see a big change is the education of the general public with stringing. And it's kind of started at the US Open. I know Australia's done that, where you can actually watch the stringers. But I would love to see the general public know more about what's going on behind the scenes. Not for, I'm not saying like cameras in the stringing room so we get FaceTime. That's really not what it is for me. But I would love the education, because education does turn into revenue, for one. If local players knew how often they should get their strings replaced, of course, yes, that does move up revenue, but I really think what that does for them is saves their arm and their game will get better. I started a little thing, I kind of joke about it, because it's a string sensation guarantee. And it's for players that are playing in USTA events where they have this NTRP. And I tell them, whatever your periodicity of stringing is, once a year, once every 6 months, once every 2 years for some, if you cut that in half, you will raise your NTRP. It's just a promise I made to them. Just cut the periodicity in half and you will see your game improve, because your equipment's getting better, your strings are getting better. And so I've had several people take me up on it, and not one person has come back and said, you know what, I didn't get any better. So education is what I like to see change the most about our industry. I haven't been in the industry long enough to know all the things that probably really need to change. I'm such a newbie in the industry. I was thinking about guys like you. How many rackets have you changed? Like from the time you started playing to now, like you can't count on one hand for sure.
You'd be surprised at not that many, just because I was very stubborn. Like a lot of the pro players, I didn't change my racket for years.
Right.
Have to.
I've only had 3 rackets.
Yeah.
I had a Prince triple threat Bandit when I first started.
Oh,
yeah, and it was I don't know where I got it, but I'm sure I bought it strung. And then after my first symposium, I shifted to a Babolat Arrow, and now I'm playing a Wilson Clash. So I don't have this long history of equipment for me, but I do have a long history of loving tennis. I've loved tennis, gosh, probably since 1976. Yeah, I think it was, and I'm not a tennis historian, I don't know, but it was around those years where I just remember watching Borg at Wimbledon, and just that's kind of where I fell in love with watching the sport. Yeah. As a 9-year-old, 10-year-old boy, in the middle of July early July, watching this guy named Bjorn Borg, like, oh my gosh, he's great. Like that was a lot of fun.
So who would you say are your favorite players of all time?
Favorite players? Well, okay, so Bjorn Borg is definitely one of my favorites, just because I think I was influenced so much at an early age. Even though he didn't influence me to play, I've always loved Bjorn Borg. I've been a Lendl fan for a long time, and I'm more so now. But while he was playing, I should probably preface this, I wasn't as big of a Mac fan as I am now. Like, I actually love watching Johnny Mac play now. But during his clashes with Lendl, I was always pulling for Lendl. But, I love the magistry of Roger. I love watching it. And I love the heart of Rafa. But as far as a favorite player, I really love working with Lauren Davis and Eddie Elliott. I just, maybe because we're both small in stature, I don't know, but I just love Lauren Davis. It kind of goes back to that heart, she's got the heart of a lion. It's what I like about Rafa as much. So, but gosh, I don't think I have a favorite player. I just love watching them all. I truly do. I just love the sport, but I don't think I have a favorite player. But it's probably Bjorn Borg who was most influential to me because I was so young.
All right, we'll take that. That's an acceptable answer.
Yeah, but
even though
you know
you
what?
really dodged it, really.
I gotta throw out a couple names though, but and they're probably not what you're thinking though. But Roberto Cid, he's on the Challenger circuit. Probably don't even know who he is. Went to University of South Florida. Sid Suburbia, great guy. I love working with him. Noah Rubin, another great player I love working with. So some of these guys on the Challenger Tour are just a lot of fun to work with, and truly some of my favorites to work with.
That's awesome. So, and kind of taking it from that, like who are some of the favorite people you've gotten the chance to work with in the industry aside from those that you just mentioned?
Yeah, so on the player and coach level, truly Eddie Elliott, and I work with the coaches
right
more than I work with the players. I mean, it's so rare that we work. However, at the Challenger level, you are working with. I mean, very few players on the Challenger Tour have a coach. Very few. And so you are direct involvement with the player. But I've enjoyed working with Robbie, with Elise Mertens, Eddie Elliott for Lauren Davis. And like I said, the Challenger Tour. But when it comes to the industry, it's not just players and coaches that I've enjoyed working with. Dennis Fabian has made an impact on me. Love working with Dennis Fabian. Richard Parnell obviously is one of the highlights for me of working with him. And in the last few years, there's a guy named Dustin Tankersley who started Mosey Tennis, and he's just been a great joy to work with. We do some small challengers together, String Sensation and Mosey Tennis, and looking forward to more of that. But there's just a couple of guys that have just really been impactful to me. Of course, Grant Morgan. I mean, if I actually started thinking about it, I come up with a lot of names who have actually impacted me. But those are just a couple of guys and gals that have been impactful.
So you talked a little bit about your very short equipment history.
I thought you said I'm very short.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh.
I didn't say that.
I am very short.
I am too. So that's why I didn't say it. You're not short to me, Mike. What would you say is your favorite equipment of all time?
So are you talking racket? Are you talking shoes? Are you talking clothes, or all of it?
Whatever you want to talk about. And I'll even let's throw stringing machines into the mix too. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. I'm sitting next to my favorite stringing machine. And, but this is funny. I've had more stringing machines than rackets. So I had a Prince Neos 1000. I bought a Star 5, Babylon Star 5. I had a Prince 7000. And now I've had several Wilson Bayardos. And it's interesting.
First three. I remember the first three of those machines too.
Yes, absolutely. But while they were, I'm so glad I've had each one of those. There are parts of each machine that are just awesome.
Yeah.
But for what I'm doing in my company and the way I travel and what I'm doing, I've actually enjoyed the Wilson Bayardo. It's a phenomenal machine. It's what I use the most. So I've enjoyed it. So machines, I got to go with Wilson Bayardo. It's what I use, and I've got several of them for my company, and I use those a lot. Equipment, as far as my racket, I'm playing the Clash right now. I took a tour model, a pro model Clash, customized it to where I want it. And the string I'm playing is Luxilon Original Rough in the mains and Luxilon Original in the crosses. So I kind of stole that from Riley Opelka playbook. He does an ALU rough in the mains and an ALU in the crosses, and I kind of stole that idea from him. I went to the Clash, but I went to original rough and original, and I actually love it. I string it at 50 pounds in the mains and 47 in the crosses for the most part of the year. Sometimes I'm at, I'll drop as low as 48, 45, and I'll go up as high as maybe 51, 52, 48, 49, but 50, 48, 50, 47 is kind of where I like to keep it. That's what I'm enjoying on my racket. I've always been an Adidas shoe guy. I love the Barricade, the heavy 13-ouncer Barricade. That just was a great platform for me. It just felt good. But you could say, man, you really don't go far back, and I don't. Yeah, that's and like I said, I am playing the Clash, so that's my equipment in a nutshell. Not much.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that, man. Nothing wrong with that.
Now, what I geek out on though is stringing tools. Like,
okay, let's do that.
I geek out on stringing tools, and I do love the right tool for the job.
Let's talk a little bit about that, and let's kind of go over your favorite parts of the machines and your tools that you work with. Like, what would you say in terms of overall operation? We know you like the Biardo, but if you were looking like clamps, if you're looking at the tension, if you're looking at the stringer interface, if you broke it down, what parts are your favorite from each?
Yeah, so I love the tilt feature of the Biardo. That is why I love the Biardo so much. I can string on it all day long, and at the Open we do string all day long, and my back doesn't hurt. It just allows it to bring up to me. Not that that's very high, but then it tilts to me, so I love that. The 7000, the Prince 7000, I love the clamps. The bass.
I'm with you.
Sorry for all you other men. It's just some of the best. I just absolutely loved it. I did enjoy the locking system for the turntable. Just great. Phenomenal. The Star 5, I love the simplicity, how quick it was to take down and set up. 4 screws, 4 bolts. That thing, you're on your way. And then, my Neos 1000, I always loved that machine because that's what I learned on. You can't get much more simple than that. But as far as, those are the things I love about. Now I will tell you, the tension head on the Yonex machines, it's got a really fast release. And so when you take the tension off, that tension head goes back quickly. And what that does is for certain strings, it releases the string very quickly. And I love that as a stringer. Sometimes if the tension head goes back slow, you got to actually kind of pull the string out of the tensioner. So I did love that about the Yonex machines.
That's awesome, man. What are you using for starting clamps?
So I have 2 starting clamps. I've got a Kamoni starting clamp, and then I've got several models of the Babolat starting clamp. But I just love the Babolat starting clamp. It's a good, it's never slipped. However, it's quite rough. It's quite rough inside. So when I'm dealing with super soft strings, and on the tour we don't have to deal with it that much, but the super soft strings that will mar up, I use the Kamoni starting clamp. And the Kamoni starting clamp is just phenomenal. It's a great starting clamp. A little pricey though. A little pricey.
Well, I still remember when you showed it to me at the U.S. Open a couple years ago. You're like, dude, you got to check this out, and it's a nice little piece of machinery there.
You got to really want one.
So in terms of your tools, like in terms of your snips, in terms of your pliers, what do you like?
Yeah, so I kind of lean heavily on the Xuron world. So I'm into the Xuron snips, the needle nose pliers. It's a great tool. They're found readily I get them on Amazon. It's a great place. So I rely heavily on Xuron. When it comes to string cutters, I'm a Kamoni guy. So straightening awl, blunt awls, cutters, I go back to Kamoni. I think they make some of the best equipment. And they just, they're sharp and they last a long time. So I go Kamoni. So, I don't really have like a one true set of tools. I know when I bought my Star 5, it came with Babolat tools, and I kind of just made a hodgepodge of tools that fit me perfectly, so they're made from different manufacturers, but it's what feels good in my hand, and it's what I think does the best for me. And, every stringer's got their own ideas on which ones are best, and I never want to get into a debate because we all have our own opinions. my tools work best for me. I watch some of these other stringers. I'll throw one, there's a guy named Tadashi Osoyo. He is quite the skilled technician, but he can do things with clips, just snips that are amazing. I mean, he uses those as if they were pliers. He's got such soft touch. So I kind of got a chance to see somehow these other guys use their tools that are quite different from me. You would think that we'd all have basically the same, and we kind of do have the same tools, but it's the way we use them that are quite different. But yet we come out with the same approach and the same end result. That's what's amazing to me.
Sure. Yeah. Just like a tennis racket, right? So many different.
Just like a tennis racket. It looks the same, but the way we yield it is quite differently.
Right. So thinking about all your traveling, and again, you're going to have a different perspective on this because you've done, a lot more. You've got a lot more variety in your tournaments.
Yeah.
You're not just doing pro tour stuff. What would you say are your favorite tournaments? And again, I'll let you choose a couple if you want, kind of to work at, and as a stringer, but also as a fan of the game.
Fan of the game has got to be the U.S. Open. Wow, it's just such an electric atmosphere. We get a chance to walk around the grounds, and you're surrounded by the fans. So we're a lot of people in one area that have one thing in common, and that's tennis. So I just love that venue. I was looking forward to going to Paris, France this year. It's a little sad. Supposed to fly out to Paris tomorrow. Of course, that got changed. But I was looking forward to my first French Open. So I'm kind of see what that's all about. But as far as just a tennis tournament, I enjoy the college championship week. So like SEC championships, ACC championships, Pac-10, Big Ten, Pac-12. I love those types of weeks. College tennis is super exciting. Just the format is exciting. Dual match format is kind of cool. So I love college tennis for that. But just probably as a stringer, everything put together, it's got to be the Challenger Tour. That's my favorite. It's low key, not a lot of fans usually, but you got these hungry players. I mean, they're hungry, sometimes quite literally, but they're hungry, and it goes back to that interaction, a lot of one-on-one interaction. And I just love seeing them grind day in and day out. And literally, like, their life is like, some of these guys pay more in travel expenses than they make when they lose early. And I'm like, wow, and so it's kind of motivating for me. I want to do my very best for each one of those players, because I feel like they need it more than when I do a Grand Slam. And that's, of course, we don't string differently, but I feel like I have a bigger part of the Challenger Series than I do the Grand Slams. I really do. Like, I think anybody could string a Rafa racket and he'd still beat you with it. Whereas I guess it's a Challenger Tour. I just love it so much. And it does go back to that one-on-one interaction. And we're right there. Most challengers, the stringing setup is right next to the courts. So we actually get to see in Cleveland, where we set us up in the Cleveland Challenger, it's right next to a practice court. And so when they're hitting overheads, literally we're getting hit with tennis balls. So we are close to the action. When they go up to start hitting overheads, we actually just, all right, we got to take a break, because we've been hitting the head so many times with these guys. But it's so close. Whereas at like a Grand Slam, one of our stringing rooms is at the bottom of Arthur Ashe Stadium. So we don't get to watch tennis other than on a screen. So I guess if I had to just boil it all down, it's probably the Challenger Tours that are my favorites for sure.
That's awesome.
But I do love the Eddie Herr at Thanksgiving with my buddy Mitch and Dennis.
I have to say, I was going through some old stuff the other day, and I found some of the old stringing tickets, and to go through some of the names where the players are starting to come up, it's pretty cool.
Oh, it's quite amazing. I mean, we call it the next gen guys that are big on the tour,
Right.
but we've strung for them at the Eddie Hearn.
Right.
Like, it's crazy when you go back to think about this, and you're like, oh my gosh, we strung for him when he was a kid. And we had no clue that in 3 years he's going to be leading the next gen,
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what was kind of so amazing about that tournament is you just didn't know which kids were going to explode out of this.
Yeah. And, but they don't have to be leading the next gen series for me to get gratification and satisfaction out of it. I've met so many young players. Of course, you develop relationships with their family, their coaches, their moms and dads. I've kept up with them through social media, and now they're off at college, graduating college, and that's just cool to me. Follow their college careers. They'll never make it on the tour maybe, but, they still write me and say, hey, I won my first college match. And I was like, I remember stringing for them when they were, 15, 16. Well, that's kind of cool.
Very cool. So shifting gears a little bit, thinking about how, and again, you've already done this a bunch. So, I want to phrase this question in a way that, that pays, homage to that. What is one piece of advice you feel like you could give to a novice stringer to make them better or closer to professional level?
Yeah, I actually have thought about this a lot because I get asked that question a lot because I think I connect to the novice stringer easily because, hey, 3 years ago, that's where I was. And so I think sometimes I remember the first time I met Richard Parnell, and I was like, in the stringing world, I was like, I'll never be like this. But I talked to guys on the forums, and they're like, just a few years ago, you were not even stringing. So I'd say the first thing to do is get involved with an online forum or some type of group of stringers. And we have so many opportunities for that nowadays. When I started, which wasn't long ago, we really didn't have as many, or at least I didn't know of them maybe. But now there's so many online forums that are bringing stringers together, and we're offering tips. So I think that's the first thing. The next thing I think that's really important is get certified. Whether it's the USRSA, the ERSA, if you're in another country, but just get certified. Just the process alone will make you get better, learning what you got to do to get certified. And then the third thing is go to some training event. Take that online forum and then go to an event. I miss our symposiums because they're so good, but find an event, and there will be more. I know of other groups that are planning some symposiums. Go to an online event. I mean, a local event where you can learn from the best stringers. And then you got to jump in. If tournament stringing is what you want to do, you got to find some small local tournaments, and you may only get 2 frames of that tournament, but just the process that you have to go through to set up, take in a racket, you will learn. I'm training a young guy here in town right now to kind of join with me, and so when I'm out of town, he can do some local events. And he's a great stringer, really good stringer. He's learned so quickly. But I was going out of town, and I needed him to do a small junior event for me. Like, he was like, I'm not ready to do this small event. I'm like, you may have 5 rackets total. Like, it's a small event, but I want you to do it so you can get some experience. And he said he was just so afraid, and I kind of liken it to, you can't learn to swim by sitting on the side of the pool. You got to jump in the water, and it's a little scary to jump in. You may swallow a little water. I look back to my first couple of tournaments. I was not a good stringer. My first junior event that I strung, I really, I look back and I was like, wow, I made some mistakes, and I know I did. But that's the way you learn. And it's scary. I was always afraid of some of the Prince rackets. They really scared me as a new stringer. I would take the Stringer Digest with me to all of them because I was so afraid. And my fear was that I'd open that Stringer Digest and see a bunch of words instead of just numbers. Some of those Prince rackets, like there's a whole page of where I'm like, I'm like, if someone had to write a page on how to string it, there's a problem, you know. And it was there was a bracket. I don't even know what it was, but it was a double back at the end. And I was doing a small junior event. And if you don't double back, you cannot finish that last cross. And I was sitting there and I was stuck, and the player was watching me. He was 14 years old, and I couldn't finish his racket. Every time I tried to pull that last one, because the racket would shift, I'm like, ah. And it said cross back or something, whatever Prince used back those days. I could not figure it out. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I couldn't finish his racket.
Was that Speedport Red?
It was a Speedport. I actually don't remember, but you had to double back.
Maybe a Speedport Blue. Yeah.
Yeah. But so I didn't know what to do. Like, I counted the number of holes so many times. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to finish it. And my daughter, thankfully she was there. She pulled out the stringing digest. She looked up the racket and she goes, Dad, there's a lot of words here, but you might want to read this. And she pulls up some about, you have to double back. No kidding, Mitch. I didn't know what that meant. That was so new. I was like, I didn't know what that meant. I'm like, Casey, Google it. Google it. She Googled it, and I saw, I'm like, and I finished the racket, turned it in the kid as if like, I got this. That was like my favorite stringing experience, because I was under the gun, and my daughter helped me figure it out.
Oh, and you'll never forget that either. So.
I will never forget it. Yeah, so that's what I would tell for a young, or not have to be young, a new stringer that wants to get into tournaments is get involved, learn, get certified, and then go do a small tournament.
And what do you think is kind of the main thing that separates a novice from a professional in terms of process, but also in terms of quality? What do you think? Things?
I don't think it's the machine.
Yeah.
I really don't. Professional stringers use these great machines, and they're awesome. But I really believe that you can take just about any machine and turn out high quality string jobs, for sure. So I think I know the key that separates professional level stringing from a novice stringing is consistency. Racket after racket after racket. And I've talked to a lot of stringers that are on these forums, and I tell them, it's like, whatever you do, do it the same every single time. I always say, I call it like a signature, the way an artist signs a painting. I have little things that I do on my rackets. I can tell if they're my racket. I can tell whether it's the knot I use, whether it's where I tie off, the way it's mounted. So consistency in every single thing you do. And if you're not repeating your process, and I mean every single thing you do, I think that's the key is that, whether it's like even placing an overgrip on a player's racket, I can tell if I did the overgrip. I do it different than probably anybody around this area, but I don't do it differently than a lot of guys on the tour, because that's where I learned it from, So I think I'd be hard pressed to find mine away from someone else's, but just consistency in everything, and like down to the detail. If you're going to put a stencil on a racket, put it in the exact same place every single time you do that racket. So consistency. That's the key. And then practice. And, Richard Parnell always told me, he said, don't try to get fast, try to get good. I think sometimes as stringers, we're like, I can string a racket in you name the time. And we like to go for that. It's kind of like weightlifters, like, I can bench press so much. It's not about that. It's how good you are. So Richard always told me, work on your technique and speed will come. But speed with bad technique is no good.
Yeah, agreed.
That's probably what I offer.
Thanks, Mike. No, and good advice. And I think, good points for, the stringer looking to get better. So really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, just want to say thanks very much for taking the time to sit down and chat with us today.
Oh, yeah. What a blast.
It's always nice catching up with you.
It's raining in Chattanooga today. So what else was I got to do? Mow the yard?
So Well, thanks very much, and we look forward to seeing you at some tour events when we get back on tour, man.
I really hope to see you guys at some tour events real soon. So absolutely. But thanks for having me, Mitch.
All right, thanks, Mike.